Well, welcome to Advocacy Arena, guys. Glad to have you back with us for this bonus episode and interview with my fabulous friend and the co host of Advocacy Arena podcast, our weekly live, Gywnne. And I have Gywnne here with us today. We're going to be talking about her area of specialty, which is unions. So, Gywnne, you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, hi everyone. How are you? I'm happy to be here. I'm excited about this.
Well, we are too. And so we're just going to dive right in. I want you to tell people like what your involvement in the labor movement and unions are. Like, when did you get involved or how did you get involved?
Um, I feel like, I've thought about this question, and I feel like I was involved from very early age in my life, and I know that sounds like some kind of trope or something, but it is actually true. My mother and my father were both union members. My mother was a firebrand, always outspoken in regards to understanding what her rights were, being a very strong union member. And so it was ingrained in me at the kitchen table and in my everyday life.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will say that when I was in college, and I was trying to find, a profession that I knew I could succeed in, and that I was going to be able to help people, I thought, I'll go into human resources. And as I sat in those classes, I was realizing that they weren't talking to me in a way to help protect the workers. This was all about covering the company. And I remember being very much disappointed and distraught because that's not how I was raised. And I thought, what am I going to do with my life? What what am I had come to this moment. My father had passed away, and I was like, I have to find my path here. There's no more room to be childlike. It is time to step up and be an adult and really figure out what I'm going to do. And after my father had passed away, I had taken some classes in writing. And I thought, okay, well, here you go. You can definitely earn a living writing, so I decided to apply for the journalism and communications program and public relations. So I did that, and I never looked back.
Okay.
So that's where that led me to my job at Ford Motor Company, and I was grateful enough to have worked with the Ford Motor Company Fund, which worked very closely with the UAW.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was
What
still,
is the UAW for those who may not
oh,
know?
I'm sorry. So, yes, the International UAW is the United Auto Workers of America, and they represent not just manufacturing, but technical office and professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And graduate students, people in the defense industry, people in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. I mean, cops,
Okay.
lawyers, nurses. It just goes on and on. And I was very surprised to learn that myself when I actually was able to, uh, be employed by them.
Okay. So talk about your activity once you started working in this manner with the union and how it kind of evolved.
Well, so Do you mean prior to me? How did I ended up getting the job with them, or actually after I
Yeah,
started? Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, it's really I that's a good place to start because I need people to understand it was it was a blessing, and it was just I ended up being in the right place at the right time in order to be able to even secure this. So I'm working with Ford, and we're doing all these programs. And at that time is when Ford was opening their family service and learning centers. It was the big computer giveaway. It was a really different time. This was prior to any industry malfeasances that happened, and so we were celebrating, an anniversary with with Henry Ford, and there were just so many programs that I was closely working with UAW representatives and, the executive board. So I remember when these family service and learning centers were opening and these computers were starting to be sent out to members, and one of the executives looked at me and said, "Isn't this wonderful? Because you'll also be able to benefit from this as well." and and I looked at him and I said, "This is absolutely an amazing opportunity for people who are going to receive this, but I will not, because at the time I was a contract employee, even though my title was the assistant manager in global news, and I worked at Ford World headquarters. And I wasn't the only one. There were many of us. This was just par for the course. This is
Hmm.
how many corporations operate. And, so yes, I could work on these amazing projects and I could see it benefiting all of these people, and not be able to take part in it. But it didn't bother me. It was just, I just answered honestly. And he kind of looked at me and said, "Huh." And after our work with that program was done, he asked me, would I be willing to come in for an interview? Would I be willing to take a risk and jump ship and come to the other side? And I was elated. Are you kidding me? I'm like, this is what I asked God for
I
this
was
many, many
born
years
for
ago.
this.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, and now here we are. Absolutely, I will be there. So that's how it started, and it was a process. I had to go through several rounds, and it's not it. You don't just walk in off the street and get a job. On the president's staff of the International UAW, working at their headquarters, Solidarity House in downtown Detroit,
Okay, so tell
easily.
people, right. So tell
Yeah.
people, like once you went through all of the interview process and you
Yeah.
were hired, what position were you hired for and what did it entail?
So, my official title was the international rep for the Public Relations Department, and I had many different duties, and I was really grateful for that because of my relationship with Ford Motor Company, and because of the vice president of the Ford department, who was Ron Gettelfinger at that time. I did a lot of assignments for him. So I did a lot of media events and media outreach. So, that was one thing that I did. I also did media monitoring and reports for the executive board. I wrote speeches. I did media training, not just for uh, our members who are being interviewed by um, local media or national media, but also for our executive board members who felt that they needed a little bit of help and brush up. A lot of them have come up through the ranks, and so obviously dealing with local negotiations, they have had interactions and they have had plenty of FaceTime with media, but it never hurts to brush up. And so I was there. I had already been doing this, in that capacity at Ford Motor Company. So I had the insight and the ability to do it, I ran a teleprompter. I mean, I did what was necessary. I did. I helped with the videos. I helped put together scripts. I wrote speeches. I also worked with an organization within our or that's attached to the Public Relations Department and is still attached to it, the Labor Union Press Association. When I
Okay.
was working, we had just changed the name from Labor Union Communication Association to, or actually now it's called Labor Union Communication Association. When I started, it was called Labor Union Press Association. We wanted to make sure that we were, moving with the times and growing with the times because a lot of the local unions were no longer putting out print, except for to retirees. Most of their official union communications were being done obviously online, moving with the times. So there were plenty. I went to rallies, I went to marches, I was sat with members and while they spoke with, members on the Hill. I did what was necessary in order to best service our membership. And one of the main things that I did was help to put together the the copies that union members get for their ability to be able to vote on the contracts, because obviously, when you get a contract, it is hundreds, can go up to thousands of pages because it is a
Mm-hmm.
master agreement. So there's got to be a leaflet, a newslet, not a leaflet, actually it's a booklet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just basically a contract summary.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped write the information for that, and then the duties for layout were, assigned accordingly. But you had to wear many hats, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what's required. And I did it with a smile because every day I could leave there and I knew I had helped at least one person.
Right. So I'm sure that that is a great part of your motivation
Yes.
for the work that you did there. And, I want to kind of go back in time a little
Sure.
bit and then, go forward because obviously you've told us that you grew up in a union household family.
Yes.
But let's kind of go back and let people know, tell people a little bit about the history of the labor movement in this country, like when unions begin to rise, and then we'll also cover their decline, which they absolutely did. So share a
Yeah.
little bit with us about the history of the labor movement.
Yes. Okay. So people pretend as if the union is something new, as if it just started, being a part of our society, or either that it is old and is no longer necessary in our societies. And I just want to say that that is a complete falsehood that people need to kind of let go of. So in the 1800s, the rise of the era, there are literally people dying to work. Um,
Mm,
and so this is the early beginnings, when people started to say this is not acceptable. You don't have to die in order to um, receive a paycheck. And
mhm,
so they began deciding that they would join together collectively. And that is how, there's no other way to term it other than collective bargaining. And that
mm,
is the rise of the union. So the UAW had some starts and stops because there were several different leaders who had different ideas on how to proceed and how to actually engage with management. And so, we finally get to the 1930s, and you see the actual beginnings of the UAW.
mhm,
And of course, this is going to really primarily focus on the auto manufacturing industry because that is really where the UAW started, and that's where it gained most of its membership, and that's where it earned its
Found,
title.
yeah, found its footing.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So yeah, um, it was. I think people need to also recognize. I mean, I've heard a lot of different people who have downplayed the union's relationship in regards to civil and human rights. And I just want to say that from its early inception, the UAW made certain that uh, all workers were included. It became a contract demand that that black people and underrepresented, and at the time, let's just say it was black people because that was the majority of what was happening. That they would there would be white workers and then there would be black workers. The black workers were not being included in the union, and the UAW made a decree that no, that is completely unacceptable.
Hmm.
You will accept this man as your brother. You are your brother's keeper, and that is how we're going to move forward. And it also became a contract demand to the corporations. No, we're going to pay every single person working in this facility, in this industry that we represent, the
Hmm.
same, because
Right.
we're fighting for social and economic justice. And so,
Yeah, exactly. So, like unions obviously gave, and I've heard you say this many times that, although people were working to better their lives and their coworkers, but they made the lives of every American worker better. What are some of the things that the union gave us? Some of
well,
those benefits.
let's talk about the fact that we got the 40-hour work week.
Okay.
Let's talk about the fact that we got health care,
Mm-hmm.
safety on the job, and job security.
Mm-hmm.
Managers could no longer come to you and say, "Well, first of all, you got to work. I know you've worked 50 hours. Now you got to work 20 more hours, and if you don't, you're fired." Nope, that was not that was no longer an option. And the sit down strikes really were what made a difference when the union really showed its power and really began to prove to workers in this country and everywhere else, I believe, that unions work and collective bargaining is a real source of power.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it gave people like political power
Hmm.
against powerful corporations, but it gave them individual economic power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Helped to bring about the middle class lifestyle that most Americans think of as
Yeah.
the American way of life, and so. I know that. Did you want to add something to that?
Well, I also want to say that I think that people often, mistake the fact that unions have just become politically active. Like, oh, it's now they're clamoring around these politicians because it's economically appealing to them, and I want to say that that is absolutely false. There has always been an ideology within the union, or at least within the UAW. I'm going to speak specifically about my union, the union that I know and love and that I have experience with. Um, the old saying of the bread box is tied directly to the ballot box. This is
Mhm.
not new. We did not just begin to support and participate in civic engagement lately.
Right.
because it's trendy. It has always been that the idea was to support politicians and legislation that benefited working people. Because, sure, not everybody has to join a union, but everybody should be treated fairly and equitably on the job. And that's really the goal.
Right.
Fairness and equality, um, and dignity on your job and
Hmm.
in your life and in your communities where you live. So,
Right. And because of that, they're fighting for rights that
yeah,
benefited all Americans, and these things had to be put into law, which require lawmakers. And
yeah,
I heard you talk about, often visiting, with representatives, with members of the of Congress, and that sort of thing. So let's talk a little bit about like some acronyms that I know are part of the labor movement that many people may not know. But what is the NLRB and the NRLA? What are they, and what do they do?
so the NLRA is the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. Um,
Okay.
it's also known as the Wagner Act, and it basically became law that promoting collective bargaining to create a peaceful relationship and equitable relationship between employers and employees, meaning that employees had the right to bargain collectively and demand representation by their union or by a union of their choice, to uh, hammer out these details where they received benefits that were better than the conditions that they had been working in. And
Right.
by this it was guarantee. This isn't a, gentleman's handshake agreement. Nope, this is law.
Hmm.
You're now in a contract. And
Right.
it is law and you have to abide by it. And if you don't abide by it, there are routes and ways for workers to seek compensation.
Okay.
And I think that's really important because I think people think, oh well, they just gain these wages and then like the job is done. Like people go home and that's it. No, it is an ongoing servicing relationship between not just the union and the union reps, but also the union reps, and the company to ensure that they are abiding by this contract. And then, if they're not, that is when you end up going to the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board.
Okay.
So that is when workers have the opportunity to demand recompenses for most of the time it's because of lost wages.
Hmm.
Lost wages are unfair treatment, whether it's harassment, whether it is an unfair firing, whether it is a job safety issue. But the National Labor Relations Board, it's an independent federal agency, and it protects the rights of workers in the private sector, to not just join together with a union, but also without a union. And I don't think people realize that they have the ability to um, file a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board unless I think people think they have to be in a union in order to do this, and that's not the case. And I believe that that's one of those carefully hidden secrets because
Mm.
it also, if it's hidden and it's secret, then workers don't realize the power that they have.
Right.
um, and so, because it is this independent agency, but it is, the president does have the ability to appoint members to it. It is important who is sitting in that office, because if
Hmm.
you get someone who is anti-union or anti-worker, anti-labor, anti-working class people, then you end up with someone who is not going to look at your case favorably, and your rights are going to continue to be diminished and oppressed.
Right.
So we have to be very clear. I don't think people realize just how much politics plays in their everyday lives without them even, thinking about it. They turn on a light and they think, oh yeah, the light turns on. That's how even that action is politically, influence. Thank you. That's the word.
Mhm.
Influence.
Right. And the fact that, when I, kind of delved into, information, trying to increase my understanding of the labor movement and unions, one of the things that I did learn was that the NLRB, because as you said, it's a federal agency, and I'm glad that you talked about, the president being able to appoint people to this board, and it matters like where they stand as to how they will act or not act upon things that are brought to them. I learned that they have been underfunded.
Oh
Um,
God, for years.
mhm, and that they have lost like 39% of their staff.
Absolutely. And so what happens? What happens? Think about that. If you went to let's just you went to some random store and 39% of the staff that you saw there, last week is no longer there. What kind of service do you think you're getting? What kind of product do you think is going to be delivered to you? What do you think happens?
Hmm.
You become discouraged, you become disgusted, and you no longer believe, you no longer have faith in the fact that there is actually a a way for you to receive the assistance that you need. So then
Hmm.
what happens? And then it's the union's fault, right? Oh, they didn't do anything for me.
Right. It's almost like they're being set up to fail.
Absolutely. It's like our education system. It's like our political process. Um,
Exactly.
break it and then complain that it's broken and then tell everybody that it fails.
Right. And you know that I'm watching very closely, as are you, because you're always interested in all things union. And in
Yeah.
our podcast, we cover these things, and I always give you the lead on that because you do have a depth of understanding that I could never, um, approach. But here in my state of Tennessee, we have some big organizing going
Oh,
on
yes.
around
Yes.
a Chattanooga plant, and you know, people, I think, in general, know that union organizing in southern states is not as popular and is not as easy because of certain laws, like the right to work law. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that a little bit. Give me your thoughts about that law, how it maybe came to be, because I've heard you talk about that,
Yeah.
and why it is so difficult. Union organizing is so difficult in southern states.
Oh, absolutely. So, being from the Motor City state, it never would have occurred to me that we would become a national right to work state.
Mm,
And luckily, we are no longer one. But let's just talk about that. The fact that the founding state of the UAW, one of the proudest unions that I've ever, known. And of course, I'm going to be partial and biased. I mean,
naturally,
I
we won't
naturally,
hold it
I
against you.
love the UAW, but basically, I watched this happen in Wisconsin and never imagined that we were going to also have it visited upon our own home state. And when I say I watched it, I'm saying we were very actively involved in fighting off Scott Walker, who is just, will never respect that human being. And so here we had Governor Engler who pushed it and actually gained enough traction that it actually it became a law. And that what it means is that it's not disbanding a union. It's not making unions illegal, but what it does do is it discourages people from paying union dues or even joining a union, because what it did is it kind of cut off the legs of the union.
Mm-hmm.
Union representatives are paid through union dues. So it is the same as being underfunded by, like our government agencies. So if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the dues, then you don't have the bodies that can help service the needs of the workers. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens is the union continues to grow as the facilities and industry grows, but the people who are servicing those same industries and facilities either shrinks, becomes it either stays stagnant or shrinks, and
Mm-hmm.
that's an issue. So you would the person not paying dues would still get all the benefits of being a union member, all the representation. They file a grievance. They need any type of assistance, whether it's on the job or through other resources that the UAW can offer, or at least get them in touch with. All of those things are still there. They get the same wages. They get all of the protections, but they don't have to pay dues. And
Mm.
some people, they love getting something for free. You know, I
Right.
mean, let's be
It,
real.
it
Yeah,
doesn't cost you anything.
right. Doesn't
So,
cost you a damn thing. So but at some point, you end up getting what you pay for. At
mm,
some point, something falls through the cracks, and I'm gonna tell you that we 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 didn't work 40 hours a week as union representatives. I'm going to be very honest with you. I have a card with my name on it, and every time a new president was elected for the UAW, I got a new card, and it would say, that I worked for, this president, and I served at his pleasure, at the needs of the membership, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I'm not saying that
wow.
I worked that like that, but I'm saying that yes, it is a very real, honest thing that I could get a call on Saturday saying, "Hey, so what we're doing is we're going to take a bus and we're going to drive to DC, and we're going to have a rally, and then we're going to march up to Capitol Hill, and we're going to speak to some representatives, and we need you to be on that bus." And that
Okay.
was your life. I would be on contract negotiations where, you're out of town, and negotiations stall. And then you're there for, you find yourself there a month later, a month and a half later, with no contract. But you're not leaving because they're not leaving the table.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's I will never say it's a thankless job. I feel very thankful, even if and the members were thankful. You heard from them, you saw them, you met with them, you engaged with them, you were around them. This was you're not isolated. You're not
Mm-hmm.
above them. You're working right along with, side them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's very hard to hear people say the union doesn't do anything, when I know how hard I and many others worked so hard to protect uh, uh,
Right.
the members in this process. So that I don't feel kindly towards national right to work laws, and I think that it's a great hindrance to people joining the union. It and it really bothers me that it has put out this this narrative that workers don't need a union. And what can a union do for you? You don't even have to pay dues. So why, if you're not paying dues, and you can talk to your boss and bargain your own way, what do you need a union for? And so unions, it makes the person then be selfish, not realizing that maybe today you don't need them. Maybe today you're not injured. Maybe today you don't need to take family leave. Maybe today your wages weren't stolen, so it doesn't matter to you. But tomorrow, next week, next year, or your child, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle might end up, if they're working in the same facility, in the same position. And so that's why it should matter. And
Yeah.
it is very reminiscent and almost like a mirror image of how I feel about civic engagement. And I think that's another thing that I do absolutely love about the union, that it mirrors so closely with the power of collectively coming together to protect an ideology and to fight for the rights of people. That is what makes the union strong. That is what makes our democracy strong. Y- I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
W- Yeah, and we've talked about this. You have talked a bit before. We had an entire weekly forum
Yeah.
dedicated to the history of the labor movement and how much it intersected with the civil rights movement. And
Yes.
let's talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to go
Yeah.
back to these southern states and their push, their anti-union push. So let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about the intersection of the civil rights movement and the labor movement.
Yes. So, a lot of people do not realize the friendship, the mutual respect that was held between Martin Luther King and Walter Reuther, who was definitely one of the most iconic UAW presidents that we have ever known, we have ever seen. That many, if you know anything about labor, I'm sure you've heard the name Walter Reuther before. The man, they tried to assassinate him. That's how
Mm.
that's how strong of a power he was for workers and civil and human rights. So there was this friendship, there was this relationship, and labor wanted to be very much involved in supporting the civil rights movement. So the idea came about, with the Southern Coalition as well as the Labor Coalition to, let's see if we can make this happen. Is the March on Washington a reality? Will people come? Will people support it? How will we manage it? So, in order to get all their ducks in a row and make sure that this was something that was tried and true, and I think I want to stop for a minute and just say, oh, I've seen a couple threads on Twitter. I'm not calling it the other name, where people have talked about the fact that the civil rights movement was not a loosey goosey thing. Like they actually tested out their ideologies and their ideas of their putting their strategies in action. How would it be received? How does it reflect upon the movement? How does it truly give the right uh, end game for it's meeting the agenda and the goal towards forwarding the civil rights movement and gaining the right to vote and gaining humanity and dignity um, and all of these achievables that they could get from what they were actually fighting for. And so it was the same thing with the March on Washington. There was a march that was organized in downtown Detroit, and it was largely funded by the UAW. Not only that, Martin Luther King Jr. had an office in Solidarity House in downtown Detroit for him to come and work peacefully when he was there, and also just to be, to have the union right there, to kind of receive whatever he needed from them at the moment. And so he
Mhm.
wasn't displaced and floating around. This was someplace where he was going to be safe and protected and surrounded by people who are like-minded, who could help strategize and move the civil rights movement forward. And so, the same way we celebrate the March on Washington and we acknowledge it every single year, we also here in Detroit acknowledge it and celebrate it. And there's a big to do, and it's replicated,
Mm.
by the community and by labor union and religious communities and other nonprofits, um, coming together just to remember what we were able to achieve. We, proverbial we, obviously I
Mhm.
was not there, but, what we
Mhm.
were able to achieve and how we can continue this type of coalition, because that is what it takes, um, in order to gain progress in this country.
Right. And with that being said, I want to talk about, I want to go into the decline of the union, um, because we have kind of covered that it is, politics are definitely involved, and at various
Yeah.
times in our country, it seems to me that when there was attention focused by the president and the highest political offices in the land toward that labor movement and that work, that it gained power, it got rights, and at the same time, when we had presidents who did not, we saw a decline in that. Talking about Ronald Reagan, and
Yes.
FDR being, one of the first presidents, I would say, who was very pro labor and involved in it. So let's talk about that a little bit. Give me some of your labor history around those presidents, that those high offices
Okay.
holders.
So I want to first say this. There is also, a misconception that the UAW is not or has not never taken a stance on environmental and climate issues. There was a huge downturn, in the automotive industry, and I think it was right on the heels of the oil crisis and, the the strife that was happening with, the airline industry. There was a lot happening in that time period, and it all kind of came together. Ronald Reagan, that insufferable president that the Republicans love to hold up as like, oh, he was so awesome. He was not an icon to me. He was not a great president to me. I personally have no love for him, no love for him at all. And when he forced those workers back to work in the airline industry and basically broke the union, and demonized them as being greedy and lazy. And it was, if there's one thing Republicans are good at, they're good at repeating something so often that people suddenly believe that it is truth. So we
Mhm.
had a collapsing, airline industry, as far as the workers, and their spirits are being broken, and their rights are being taken, and so then all of a sudden they're looking and saying, well, the union didn't protect us. It's kind of hard to protect when laws are written against you,
Mhm.
and the politics are turned against you, legislation is turned against you. And then when you are working in an automotive manufacturing industry where, Doug Frazier and Owen Bieber, are literally, writing white papers and conducting studies and saying, I think you need to be paying attention to the fact that we have some foreign manufacturing industries coming in, and they are going to take a large portion of your profits because of the efficiency of the vehicles that they're building. The they're cost effective, they're cheaper, they're less on gas, they're not as heavy on the roads. I mean, there were a million things. I mean, there are historical papers that it wasn't just to the auto execs to Washington to be making this plea like we need to do something in order to protect our industry, our workers, and
Hmm.
being ignored basically. And then, of course, what happens? You start seeing Honda making very huge inroads, cutting into the profits, and, General Motors, Ford Motor Company, Chrysler being slow to turn and pivot and understand that the customer base has changed, and so then they need to change. And so what we had a lot of people get laid off. And so what
Hmm.
does that do? That also discourages people. And then who do they blame? They don't blame the people trying to protect the workers. I mean, they don't blame the company. They blame the people who are trying to protect the workers because they're
They didn't
corp
achieve their goal, or they
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
get what they
yeah.
wanted for them.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it's because those were the people who had the cameras. Those were the people who had the money to put out the ads and make statements and demonize the union. So the same thing that you see happening in politics also happens in this arena, in the labor arena as well. And by destroying our diminishing the labor movement, they also knew that they could diminish the union's power,
hmm Again,
the
we go
union's
back to that.
effectiveness on
Hmm.
politics and their influence in the community and in organizing.
Right.
And so here we are.
Right. And I remember when we were doing the labor movement history, I think we did it in September around Labor Day.
Yeah,
And we talked about how, the Pullman strike, President Grover Cleveland sent
yeah,
in, marshals
yeah,
at that time during the strike. And, so they, again, I feel like took away the power of organizing
yeah,
and the power from the people. Their political power and influence being diminished because of the leaders of our country at that time. And we saw the same thing happen, of course, with Reagan. And
yeah,
I feel like since then, I feel like they gained steam in the 50s. They recovered from, Cleveland because of
yeah,
FDR. But, at the 50s, I see them being kind of at their peak and then slowly starting to decline. And here we are today. You mentioned something that caught my attention because I was, again, very focused on what's happening here with the union organizing efforts here in my state, but in the South in general, and was looking into some of the ways that corporations stop that momentum.
mm-hmm,
Of course,
mm-hmm,
you talked about it a little bit, unfair firings, withholding people's, benefits and raises. And then, like a new modern method is something they call bossware, or basically spying on union um, leaders or people who are trying
mm-hmm.
to lead those effort. And the most interest that was very interesting to me. But then you talked about it a little bit, but they call these captive audience
Captive
meetings,
audiences. Yes, yes,
that they
yes. The
hold.
meaning. Yes,
Talk
basically.
about that a little bit.
Okay, so normally in an organizing drive, and God bless every single organizer in this entire United States of America, because that is a seriously not for the faint of heart. It takes courage. It takes grit. It takes, an unbound amount of determination. Notwithstanding that, when an organ, when the news comes to the facility that these workers are going to organize, that this is what they want, there's the opportunity for the company to then have informational meetings about why a union is really not necessary. Now, these can be somewhat neutral, where they say, well, here's what we're willing to offer you. This is what we're going to do. And what they're not saying is this is what we're going to do in order to keep them out. And we might not actually live up to all of these promises.
Mm,
And then they can get even uglier where they actually name names like, Joe Smalls is going to end up getting fired. I know he's out there, lying and creating all this propaganda. He's going to lose his job, and anybody that's standing with him is going to lose his job. And, then that person starts becoming harassed. You're
mm-hmm,
not being productive enough. You're not being efficient enough. You're not putting out enough uh, product. You're not keeping up. You're not doing. There's this intimidation and harassment campaign, but they are also doing it in these meetings, and
mm,
it is overt and implied threats that are given, like we will shut down this whole damn place. And
mm-hmm,
what do you think people are saying? Because when these transplants are building themselves up, where are they usually going? Smaller communities in the South where these people have never made this amount of money ever,
mm-hmm,
regardless of the fact that it is breaking them down because, there are no, uh, what the UAW will come and do is come in, look at how a part of a job is being done, whether it's on the assembly line or, some other task that's been assigned, and say, if you keep doing that repetitive action, what is going to happen is your worker is going to end up with this type of I'm sorry,
injury. Mm-hmm,
that's going to require, lost time from the job, maybe surgery. Like, why don't we fix it now? Find out a better way to either repeat this movement, or set up this machine so the movement isn't injuring them in any way.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, that's not happening in plants where there is no union present because they don't care.
right.
They care about the output, not so much of what the worker is having to input. So, you know, um, y- their bodies are being broken down, but they are receiving this pay that they've never received, and they're terrified that if that plant leaves, then what? Where will they go? They have established this lifestyle based off of this amount of compensation that they're getting, and if that industry leaves, that is their whole entire life, and they're supporting a family, or they're
Right.
just supporting themselves.
Right.
So what do?
Yeah.
Many of them are scared, and some of them are saying, I'm sorry, I don't care what you're saying. This is not worth it. And I'm glad that they're being brave enough to say that.
Yes, and I worked for about a decade for a couple of orthopedic surgeons, and we treated a lot of
Yeah.
factory workers with those repetitive type industries. You know, you're talking shoulder and knee surgeries or injuries and those types
Yeah.
of things. So they can be very hard on the body. You know, the
Right.
type of work.
These are, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
It-
I
it-
just gonna say they can be very hard on the body over the long
yeah.
haul and leave lasting impairments.
So it's pay now or pay later. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and it's like, do you really want to risk that? Do you really want to have to pay workman's compensation? Do you really want to not fix this area where a worker's arm could get caught in a machine? We have to fix this, and we will
Mm-hmm.
fix this, because the law requires you to when you're when you have union representation, you have somebody to actually have that fight for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost takes the pressure off of the worker. Then it's not the worker that is confronting. It is the union standing in front of the worker saying, I am your guard, I am your shield, and we are here to protect you. And I don't think that people understand the significance of that if they've never worked in a manufacturing facility or any place where danger might be present at any given time.
Right. It's powerful. My
It
daughter
is.
recently, got a job a few years ago where she is a member of a union, and it was really a joy to her
Yeah, yeah,
to know that she had people who cared about her. Who, she laughed
yeah,
about it a few times because she would do something, and then one of the union reps would come to her and say, you know you're supposed to be paid this for this, or they're not supposed to ask you to do that. And it gave her a sense of empowerment to know
yes,
that it wasn't just her voice that was needed to say no, and some things that she didn't even realize she was saying okay to, that
yes,
she was being taken advantage of. And so it was quite a joy to her
yeah,
to have to know that she had somebody that had her back basically,
yeah.
uh, and that was standing in the gap for her. And one of the things that I was looking at, I know, kind of here in the South, some of this anti-union activity, like the captive audience meetings, where they, force, workers to come and attend, where they're
Mandatory.
right, trashing the unions and telling
Mm-hmm.
them how bad they will be, and then doing things like anti-union mailers and
Yeah,
commercials, to their home, or forcing them
yeah,
to watch these commercials. It was just kind of astounding, but not really surprising
yeah.
to me.
And let's talk about the fact that in national right to work states, there are also so many rules, so many restrictions that can be put in place um, that also hinder the union's ability to organize. You can't talk about it at the job, but then you can't go to their home. You can't use a telephone number gained from a coworker. It's like it's so there's so many
And
hoops that
it's
people
so
have to jump
insidious.
it is very insidious, and people don't realize that it's not it's there's this idea, well, if people wanted to join a union, then why don't they just say they want to join a union and go ahead and join this, sign the card, and da, 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 da. Yeah, you have to remember that those cards are also turned over and shared with that employer who is very anti-union, trying to keep the union out,
Hmm.
paying someone as at times at least $1 million a day to keep you out.
Right. And it makes it very hard for someone who
Yeah.
just wants to make a good living for their family.
All right.
So I am, like, very happy that the folks at the Chattanooga plant here have kind of jumped through all those hoops, and they are at the point now where I think the voting ends tonight, and we will see. And it looks
I am
very.
so excited. I am so excited. I cannot wait. I'm going to be on pins and needles waiting for this vote count to come in. I'm not kidding
Yes.
you.
Likewise. So, we'll be talking about it on Monday
Absolutely.
in our live, which is on Twitter on every Monday at 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m., 1 p.m. Eastern, and 12 p.m. Central Time. So, I want to put that plug in there. But I
Yes.
also want to talk to you a little bit about, because when I started noticing more activity here in the South, and the corporations' anti union activity was around service industries like
Yeah.
Amazon and Starbucks, and some of those kind of corporations. Why do you think service industries fight? Um, unionizing so much? Is it just the same pretty much as
I
any?
I think it is the same. They don't they once the union grows into other industries, I think that these corporations are afraid that they're going to grow into every industry, and I hope that they do.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
Yeah.
that their fears are realized. And so I also think that they feel like, well, it's not a traditional area that you would see union representation in, and so we have to stop it now.
Mm,
We do not want to see it grow because we do not want workers to be empowered. It is this exact same idea. If we keep them ignorant, um, we can control them, and it is the same thing because if if they keep the workers ignorant as to what their rights and their ability and their collective power is, they can control them. And
yes.
if they're controlled, they feel obligated. They feel like they have to be so loyal to an employer that could not care less and would replace them, within the next breath, if they thought that it would somehow benefit them in some kind of way. And I don't mean to sound callous. I do not want people to believe that I don't agree with capitalism. I don't agree with how capitalism operates, um, especially as we uh, continue to go forward in these times. It seems to be getting worse and worse. The greed seems to be overwhelmingly more and more and more and more and more, but it's only more for them,
Hmm. Yeah,
not for everyone. If we could all
right.
be growing together, then I think I would be able to stomach it a little bit better.
Hmm.
But that's not what they want. They don't I don't care about them growing. I care that they don't want us, the working people, to grow.
Right. It's extreme capitalism that
Absolutely.
bothers me. It's the greed
Yeah,
because I
it's the
mean, I
greed.
think, yeah, and that's what I see happening. And this has been such a productive conversation, and I hope that we can have some more in the future. And I'm going to kind of start to wind us down a little bit, but I do
Okay.
appreciate all the information that you have shared with me and the audience, and I hope folks have learned a lot. I always learn when I listen to you, and I want to ask you a little bit because obviously you have a passion for your union, your labor
Yeah.
work. Um, just tell me a little bit about your activism, because I don't see, even though you're no longer working for them, I see your activism around this continuing. What does that look like for you? How do you envision that?
I keep I am lucky enough that most of my relatives are union friendly.
Hmm.
So I'm still very much actively engaged in union activity,
Hmm.
whether that is being part of, the Labor Day marches, or uh, other activities around their local union activities. Uh, and during the strike, I felt moved to, during the stand up strike of 2023, I felt moved to adopt a local union.
Hmm.
And so I adopted a union, local union that was, that some of my relatives were working at. It was literally across the street from the facility that they were standing outside with picket signs. And because I felt that it was important. It is important to obviously support striking workers because they're not receiving pay. They don't know how long they're going to be out, and they still have families to support. And yes, it's their choice, but damn it, they're standing up for something, and they're standing up for something that is going to benefit not just them, but for generations that come behind them, and for the industry as a whole, because everything that is gained from the union is then filtered out to other parts of the society.
Mhm.
Like I was saying, like healthcare benefits, like the 40-hour week, like dignity on the job. I mean, sure, I've already talked about the fact that human resources is not for the workers, but there is a human resources department where you lodge an actual formal complaint, and that is on record, and you can take it and you can do something with it afterwards. You do have power whether you're represented by a union or not, and that is what the union has taught people, and that is what the union promotes and encourages, and that is what I am always going to support. I will never not support the union, and I will never not support the UAW union till I die, and I swear it. So that's a lot of what my um support or activities now mean.
Mhm.
No, I'm not traveling to Washington to working with the members to speak to representatives, but I am there in spirit, and I am there promoting the messages, and any activity that I can possibly make people aware of, I am. It's kind of nice to be retired, to actually say, okay, now I can actually devote a bulk of my time to this cause or that cause. And for many of the formative years of my son, it was devoting a lot of my time to my son. And then, yeah, oh, by the way, I might talk about some politics and go to some rallies and be engaged in that way. But it was the George Floyd tragedy that made me decide that, okay, now it's time for me to be very much more visible within our community here,
Mhm.
and anywhere that I can to make a difference, because hearing that man call for his mother, it shook me, because I thought, this could be my son. This could be my son. I could be um, watching this happen for 8 minutes and more to my own son. And I refuse to allow that to happen to me. So, when my son was a baby, I remember he was literally a baby, and I dressed him up in this UAW bib and this UAW t-shirt, and they were on strike at that time. And it was a short strike, it was a very quick, it was over in a flash drive. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to the people in my department. They're like, "Oh my God, can we publish this?" And they decided not to, out of privacy, because his dad was like, you,
Because
you
his
know,
dad is also
eh,
someone who has worked
yes, his
for
dad was
the.
one of the top negotiators. Yes, and yeah, and let me tell you something. You cannot tell him a damn thing about what workers deserve, because that was his lifeblood. He spent his career fighting for it, negotiating it,
Mm.
actually really in the room, down in the dirt for it. And he was a phenomenal negotiator. So it's something that I have been able to also instill in my son, and I made him go with me. We would be at the grocery store, or I would go to the grocery store, and I'd come home and I'd be like, "Okay, we got to go drop this off." And at first he was like, "Ugh," and then he was like, "This was really cool. This was
Mhm.
so cool." And it became an activity that we would just do on, at least twice a month, if not 3 times a month, together, just going, delivering and checking the list and trying to see what they needed. And then I'd put it out on, social media, and let people know, like, hey, in case you're interested, this local needs such and such, and hey, check your local in your surrounding area who might need something. So I'm not just trying to instill like this social responsibility in my son. I'm also trying to instill union principles and political accountability in him, because I think that that's important. And I think that what happened in this drought of people beginning to be apathetic, not engaging, not believing in the power of the vote, is that it was stopped. It was a conversation that was stopped at the
Mm.
dinner table. It was no longer taking place. It was no longer a big influence. It was no longer a big part. And I don't want to also be a person who has done a disservice to my son. And then when he realizes later that it is something that he needs to actively be a part of and engaging in, it's like he's trying to learn it from scratch. No,
Right.
nope.
Mm.
They were marching here in our local community at the schools during the COVID shutdown for George Floyd and for Black Lives Matter movements, that because that's the community that I live in, and they were very much actively engaged, and that is something that I think is really important. And I know that these kids, they don't have a lot of great memories of that time, but I know that they remember that one, and it was significant, and there were several times that this happened. And this was organized. These kids wanted to do this, they wanted to do this, and we as parents supported them and came out and made signs and just in our masks, hey, an
Hmm.
hour or so at a time. And I think that that's important.
Right. So activism, I think
Yeah, activism.
sparked by the labor movement, your labor movement
Yeah,
involvement, but that carries over across the spectrum. I think that is
yeah,
so important. And then also, I feel like the continuing education that you
yeah.
do with people that you engage in real life, and
Oh,
then
absolutely.
online, and certainly, again, like I said, in our weekly podcast forum that we have, and you're always educating people and encouraging that activism, at their local level, because I feel like we are at a time where we are seeing the rise of, like we're seeing a lot of the rights that some of our forefathers and mothers fought for being stripped away,
Yeah,
in our civil rights, but the same thing's happening with those labor rights, because I'm seeing a rise in child labor laws. Like states
yeah.
now are actually rewriting laws to allow child labor, in
Yes, and
ways that
child
I.
labor in situations and industries that are risky and pose a danger even to an adult, and it's
Mm-hmm,
so ridiculous.
mm-hmm. So I feel like we're going backwards, and voices like yours and people who are actively involved and shining a spotlight on that, getting involved wherever they can, is so important, which is why I feel like this conversation, having this conversation with you and to a larger audience, to inform, a larger audience, is so very, very important, because, sometimes these things, they happen in small cities and
Yeah,
towns, and people don't see, I think, the bigger picture. And I think it's always important for us to kind of help paint that bigger picture and the connecting dots,
yeah.
of it all. And
You know,
go ahead.
uh, I'm sorry. I also want to say that I have become the person in my family and in my circle, in my community, where people, if they have questions about politics, then I am the person that they come to. And I'm talking about even my son's friends. If
Mm-hmm.
they have my phone number, and they will directly text me and say, Auntie, what is this and what is that? And can you explain it to me? And can you give me some links to articles that I might, read up on later, or, documentaries, or, and I don't mind being the person that does that. And while I'm not necessarily eager or, to go out and knock on doors, as I did for many, many years working with the UAW, I will text bank.
Mm-hmm.
I will. I might even phone bank a little. I did many, many hours of that as well. So I just feel like we can't. I think people think that they vote and then that's it. That's the end of the story. We don't have to do anything else. And it's the same thing with the union. Oh, I voted on the contract. I don't have to do anything else. No, you have to actively stay engaged, making sure that what was promised is being delivered,
Mhm.
or what you said you wanted protected was being protected, and fighting for it every single day.
Mhm.
Because if people think that they can get away with something, that's exactly what they're going to do. Why wouldn't they?
Right.
Why wouldn't
And
they?
and if no light is shown on it, then they kind of do get away with it. So
Absolutely.
I think it's important for voices like yours and others who are, doing that work, encouraging that active civic engagement. Is so necessary, and of course, that is one of the major goals of our weekly podcast, is to increase and inspire civic engagement.
Yeah.
Because I think we talk about how often we encounter people in conversations who don't like to talk about politics, or they don't like to get involved. And it is so important that people understand the necessity of it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to talk about it 24/7, but understand that it is affecting you 24/7 in
24/7. Exactly.
every aspect of your
Right.
life, and
Right.
certainly your job, because I do feel like a lot of people work, they're just busy trying to survive, so they don't have the time or the energy or inclination to be as tuned in
Yeah.
to it as maybe you and I and others are. But I do think it is important that we continue to work to help them understand that, because at its core, we talked about this, the union gives people political power and voice, okay? And it
Yeah.
helps to counterbalance the power of corporations and, maybe even lawmakers and things. So I want to give you an opportunity for some closing thoughts, call to actions, and
Yeah.
we'll wrap up what I feel like has been a wonderful conversation that
It's
we could
been,
continue to go
oh
on
my
and on
God.
about.
Yeah, we could just go on and on. I'm not kidding you. I could tell you so many stories. But here's something that I really want to tell you. It's a memory that I think about often. I remember the first time that we had a conference up at Black Lake, and that is the Walter Reuther Educational Center up in Onaway, Michigan. And we use that conference center. It's connected to a golf course, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just mentioning it because it's a beautiful area. And I'm sure if people haven't heard of the education center, they've heard of the golf course. Um, and we use it to educate our members on many different things. There's like health and safety classes. There's civil rights, I'm sorry, civil rights committee classes. There's and you name it, we have it. I was going there obviously for staff meetings. When the president of the UAW would have his staff in all staff meeting, meaning all of his staff would be
Hmm.
required to come up there, and Black Lake can accommodate it. So why are we paying for a hotel? Because Black Lake can accommodate it. This is ours. And there is a pride thing about that. I'm very prideful of that. It
Hmm.
is beautiful. And I remember after one full day of you know being in different being in different classes and listening to different speakers, and just standing at this rail overlooking the water, and just having this quiet moment. And my assistant director walked up to me and he's like, "So what do you think? What are your thoughts?" And I said, "I feel like I'm home.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm home." And that is seriously, it was that spiritual for me. It is that beautiful there. It is the entire place was very well thought out and designed by I believe it was I know Walter Reuther had to do it. I'd have to get you the name of who actually did the architecture and everything, and maybe I will pull some pictures and I'll post them on my timeline. But I mean, that was really how I felt. Being surrounded by a group of like minded people who absolutely were determined to change the world.
Mm,
And being surrounded by the beauty of a place who had taken into consideration the nature of it. I mean, like building buildings around trees, and building bridges over the water, not interrupt nature, but to respect it. And it's like that it wasn't it's that's the UAW. We're
mhm.
respecting the environment around us and trying to protect those who need it, all while we're working together
Beautiful.
collectively. I felt like I was at home. And I will never
Beautiful.
forget that feeling.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I again, like I said, I just want to thank you again for this interview, but also thank you for being my fabulous co-host every week in Advocacy Arena. And folks, if you want to hear more from Gywnne, you can join us where we do our Advocacy Arena Good Trouble chat live forum every Monday. Look for us on Twitter, and it's at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. And we cover the top news stories, and sometimes we have a particular area of focus. And whenever there's any kind of labor issue or news, Gywnne really does a great job of explaining it and highlighting it and giving us a background around it. So, with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of the work that you have done, for being my co host and helping to further educate folks around labor and how important it is, and for your activism, your civic engagement in general, and give you an opportunity to just, say goodbye and some closing thoughts.
Oh, thank you. Because I was gonna say, I do have to say that this interview has been long waited by you, and it was something that I never thought I had the courage to do.
Oh,
Speak, and here I am speaking, running my mouth, acting like I could talk for plenty longer, and I have to attribute that to your influence, Miss D, your mentorship,
oh.
your patience, your belief in me, and it has been a life changing opportunity for me to be your co-host, because it has given me back my courage to step outside my comfort zone and to definitely be active in ways that I never imagined I was ever going to be able to again. And
Oh.
you are an amazing human being and a true inspiration. And I am so grateful that I followed someone into that room and never looked back. Nobody's space is like Miss D's space, and now nobody's space is. And I am so I'm just humbled to be a part of that process, and I want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you, my dear. And I am always in awe of you. And it is an honor to meet someone of your caliber with your passion, your compassion, and your knowledge and your expertise, and to help, just kind of bring that out, because I don't feel like I created something that wasn't there. Sometimes people just need encouragement and support, and I'm glad that I could play a small role in that. But
Big role,
it
big role.
it's all you, and I just want to thank you for hanging out with me tonight, and I hope this is the first of many conversations that we will have about this and other things. And glad that
Absolutely.
I finally dragged you to the one-on-one.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So, with that, folks, we're going to say goodbye. So long, and hope that you will join us in our weekly advocacy arena forum on Mondays.
Yeah.
Till then, we'll see you next time.
We'll see you
Peace.
next time. Thank you.
All right. Peace and blessings. Bye bye.
Bye bye.